my name is Randy Pamakella, and I am going to be doing my coaching video with Christina Daniel today. And I just want to do a quick introduction about what it is Miss Daniel does here at school, and we'll talk a little bit about what we observed session-wise. To start the session, I would just like to share that Miss Daniel is a speech and language pathologist here at Chattahoochee Elementary. She works with students who are ages 3 to 12 in our elementary school environment. I observed a particular session where it was a mixed expressive receptive language session as well as an articulation session. And I'm going to turn it over to her to allow her to share a little bit more about individually what she was kind of working on with each student before we kind of jump into our coaching session.
So as Randy said, it was a group of 4 students, all boys. Student number 1 is an articulation student working primarily on R and R blends, specifically at the word sentence level. Student number 2 is our language-based student. He's working on multiple meaning words and being able to identify problems and solutions within a story. Student number 3 is also articulation. He's working on TH at the word level. He is new to speech therapy. He just joined our group. And student 4, also articulation. He is on the opposite end. He is getting ready to graduate from speech therapy. So he is basically maintaining, monitoring his art productions in reading and conversation.
Thank you for sharing it. Okay, so what we're going to do next is the initial phase of this, which is criterion 1, where we talk through kind of how the session went and the observations that I made. So Christina, you did fantastic with them. They are a handful and a half, but you did a great job of keeping them engaged. You guys, that's our high energy, those are our high energy friends, and they all want to take a turn to answer first to get your attention, but you did a great job of getting them to come in, kind of settle down. It was clear that they know their expectations. The expectations you hold them to, they kind of just came in, got seated, got started, even though they all wanted to share desperately all the things they did this weekend. You planned really specific activities to target each of their goals individually. I thought that it was great kind of how you just worked through each of their goals. I thought it was great that you didn't require the group to remain seated throughout the entire session. There were plenty of times where one of them was standing or fidgeting. You do a great job of recognizing that not all of our friends learn best by just sitting in a chair. And I thought it was really great how many activities you had planned. I liked that all of your students were able to engage. All of your activities were able to engage all the students together as a group. And even though when you were working with some of them individually, the others were still able to converse and practice their sounds. And it just flowed really nicely. Again, I think that it kind of lends a testament to how they know their expectations when they come in, because it would have been really easy for some kids to be distracted by all the games in the room and the other activities that were happening, because here at school we have multiple sessions in the same room. So while Miss Daniel was working with her students, there were actually 2 other group sessions happening in our room. So it can get chaotic in there, but even when it wasn't their turn, they were with you, they were present, they were practicing. And I think that you did an overall great job. If I were to ask you to reflect on the session, 1 being it was a disaster, the boys got up and left, to a 10 it being the best session, it was a dream, it was the session you wanted all of your professors in college to come back and observe, what would you rank it for yourself?
I'd probably rank it a 6 or a 7. I feel like, we're our harshest critics. There's always room for improvement. I think overall they did do a good job of staying engaged, but, when you have a group of 4 students who are working on relatively different goals at different levels, I think you're always looking for ways to up the ante in terms of how can they be more engaged, more participatory, especially with those very specific goals, trying to find ways of picking one activity instead of 4 individualized activities to, promote that idea of we're all working on the same thing, but yet we're still targeting our own individual goals.
And I think this is a good spot to kind of pause and reflect on the amount of time that you do and you don't have to work with these students, because this was a group of 2nd grade boys who are obviously working on very different things. Right. Why is it that you couldn't pull these 2 boys that were working on this thing and 1 boy that was working on that thing throughout the day?
So we have to go by the school's master schedule. So we usually tend to make it easier on the teachers, having one specific speech therapist designated for that homeroom. And with that being said, 3 students come from one homeroom and 1 comes across the hallway from another. So it's really just a matter of making sure our times sync up. We have different hours throughout the day where we cannot work with students, so lunch, recess, pathways, things like that.
And if they receive other supports, right?
Yes, some of our students are heavily supported where you can only see them for one 30-minute segment throughout the day.
Well, I thought you did a great job of squeezing many different things into one 30-minute session. If you could pinpoint one thing within that session that you think went really well, what would you say was probably the best?
Well, since we're in the month of October, we're trying to incorporate different themes to make things fun for the kids. We did do some Halloween-inspired jokes. This was, I think they would all enjoy it, and they did seem to enjoy it. It did keep them engaged. In my mind, this was specifically for our language-based student. Non-literal language is not his strength, so being able to look at jokes that have play on words, things like that, it benefited him from a goal standpoint, but they all remained engaged and enjoyed the activity.
It was endless eruptions of laughter, so I would agree that it absolutely kept them engaged, and I love how that it targeted the goals of the language child more intensely without the other kids kind of being aware of it. If there was something you could change that you think maybe would push your lesson to the next level, so in future sessions if you say, okay, we're going to do the same lesson again, but how can we make it more effective? What is something that you would want to incorporate?
Yeah, so I think because we have a bit of a slant, we have a 3-to-1 ratio of heavy articulation versus language. I'm always looking to see how can I better plan for a session in which we can incorporate one mass activity that will, lend itself equally to these different levels and different goals, rather than trying to over specify and have 4 different activities going on essentially at the same time. So instead of potentially taking turns and doing trials like I did, thinking of ways that I can use more literacy and have them all engaged at the same time in one activity versus 4.
What do you think would be really engaging? We know that they're very squirrely boys. Would it be something movement based? Would it be something technology based? What are you envisioning for this group?
Well, I think most kids, especially at this age, you whip out the iPad, you have anything technology based, and suddenly their interest increases. So technology is obviously, I think, a fun aspect for them to keep them engaged, but also we do have a squirrely bunch. So, one friend does stand up. He still stay engaged, and he'll stay by the table, but I do note that he will have to stand every once in a while, or he'll have to kind of stretch and move away from the table. So I think technology and movement are probably big factors for this group.
I love it. So ideal session, I feel like what I might be hearing is that if we could move it so that it was more cohesive and there weren't so many individualized segments, that would be a win for you. As well as the boys, obviously. But movement-wise, if we could add movement to each session in some way, have you thought of any ways that you like to add movement? I'm happy to share some ideas that I'm kicking around. What is the way that you were thinking about adding movement? I know we've talked in the past and you've mentioned something about a scavenger hunt.
Yes, so I'm hoping that at some point when I have a little bit more time to plan this out, I think a scavenger hunt would be nice. We could pull it up on the large screen in our room, and then that could be a way for each student to essentially target their goals, but they could be working at the same time, potentially collaborating to work on finding these clues throughout our classroom. So a scavenger hunt is something I have in the back of my mind.
No, I love that idea. I think a scavenger hunt would really get the kids up and moving. I love what you just said about taking them to the board. I know, because there are other groups in our session, in our room, in our sessions, at times it is sometimes hard to not distract the other groups when our specific group is trying to work on something. But I think going to the board for this group of boys, especially using tools like Boom Learning, using Pink Cat games, using all of these different websites, even you have a literacy-based child, even having them work together to kind of create a story with one of the story creators online, but getting them up and moving and at the board would just give them one more chance in the day to kind of get some of those wiggles out. It might even help them when they get back to the classroom. I know one of the things we have to consider if we want to make movement a goal is how we're going to try and measure that. So do you think that you will measure that based on how long they're able to sit in a chair, or do you think you'll look more reflectively like at the data that you collect each session?
Yeah, obviously it won't be a formal goal as based in their IEP, but it'll be probably
Right.
something I do more observationally. So, maybe using a ranking scale of some sort, maybe 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, and just getting an idea of, did I catch the student basically staring off into space during part of the session, or did they seem to be relatively engaged and participating with their peers for, 20 out of 30 minutes of the session?
20 out of 30 is a solid goal. So maybe we can work together on creating basically like a little checklist of who was engaged, what were we doing when they were engaged, and how long did they engage. I love it. I think that is something that you could implement in seconds, because you are already taking so much data on their goals that you don't want one more thing. But I think that's something that's quick and easy and will give us some good kind of feedback and insight. And I know one of the questions that we like to ask is, how will this goal make you feel? I mean, obviously we know that if we can get more movement in, the boys will feel better about it.
Right.
But what in your heart will feel better, your mind feel better if this is successful?
Well, I like the idea that obviously, we want them to enjoy coming to speech therapy, and, typically they associate us with games and fun, which is nice, but, I think being able to mask the specific goals with a game or something active that they'll enjoy doing, that usually makes me feel good, because one, it means that they enjoy coming, but they're more likely to engage and, take our goals seriously because they're having fun while doing it.
I love it. I love that reflection. I love that you're pairing the boys being aware of what their goals are, because I think that's a huge part of it. I think that sometimes our students come to us and they're like, yeah, we're here to have fun, we're here to learn, but it's hard for them to go home and tell mom and dad, this is what I learned, or this is what I was working on, or, all of these things. I think that them being able to even say at the end of each session, Miss Daniel, I really liked this activity because it helped me say my R sound better, or it helped me work on my pronoun usage better, whatever it is the goal that you're working on with them at that time. And will help them then carry that over to mom and dad at home. And I think that if parents can come to us at an IEP meeting and say, or come to you at an IEP meeting and say, hey, Sam came home and he said he played Operation with you today, and these are the goals that you targeted, and he was doing that with his brother after dinner, like that would be a huge win for us as educators. So I think that if we kind of back up for a second and I think I'm going down a path where we're going to have lots of goals, and I just want us to focus on one goal. I think adding the movement will be really helpful for them. But even also, if you had to choose between the two, adding movement as our goal and creating a checklist of kind of measurable progress towards what movement in each session is doing for the boys in that session, or the goal of having them be able to connect what they have learned with their goals, which one would you say would be more meaningful to you up front?
Well, I obviously want them to be able to know why they're coming to speech.
Right.
But I think, they're smart kids, and most of them have been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
So I think they do know. I think it's just sometimes we associate, like I said, with coming to speech with games. So naturally, they go home and they tell mom and dad, we played games. Yeah. But I think they know what their goals are. So for me, since they've already kind of tackled that aspect of speech therapy, being able to then utilize what they have, but being able to do so in a responsible way. And I think sometimes they just need the movement.
I think so too. I think that that's something we're seeing as a school, especially post-pandemic, where kids were doing that virtual learning for so long and not moving so much. Sitting in a chair all day is hard. Listening all day is hard. I love the movement goal. So I think our next steps would be in the next 2 to 3 weeks, kind of check in. We'll add those movement goals. We'll come up with that checklist together. I think having just a couple of those bullet points where we can kind of check off, this is the activity that we did. Yes or no, it helped. This is how it helped. Scale to 1 to 5, would we ever do this again? I think that'll give us good data to kind of reflect on at our next meeting and kind of plan for the future. So that all sounds great. Thanks for meeting with me today.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions or ways I can help, or?
No, I think that's a good plan.
Well, thank you for meeting with me today, and thank you guys for watching this. Bye.